In this week's study we learn that Yehuda Shalach L'fanav El Yosef L'Hayret L'fanav Goshna. Yehuda was sent ahead of all the Shvatim to build yeshivas, to be Masakinei Beis HaTalmud. Yaakov Avinu said, "My Einaklach, I'm not going to enter Mitzrayim before there's a yeshiva there. As much as I want to see Yosef, as much as time may be running out, I'm not going into Mitzrayim without yeshivas." And we know the unfortunate tale of America from the 1900s until World War II. Most who came here were lost. Yes, there were the terrible Nisyonos. Shabbos was like a regular work day, and not to work on Shabbos could mean starving. There were the stories of the shekels and the pairs of tefillin, albeit probably exaggerated, but there were stories of them thrown over as soon as the Statue of Liberty came to sight. There was the predominant feeling amongst the immigrants that the quicker they would dump their Yiddishkeit, the more they would be accepted into American society. The faster their nameplates will be implanted on the streets that were paved with gold. And yes, when they pleaded with the Belzer to come to America, he said that there is a klipa on America, there is a tumah, there is a shell that's going to block true Yiddishkeit until eventually that klipa is going to be broken with great difficulty. And of course the extent of how great that difficulty would be, no one could have possibly imagined. But let's put all of this aside for a moment. And let's talk about the simple pshat of why most, and again I repeat, not all, there were the brave and the few that were courageous that withstood the Nisyonos, but why most completely disappeared into the American scene. It's only small fragments or vestiges of the Yiddishkeit that were left. The simple teretz is, there were no Talmud Torahs, no yeshivas in America. Yes, there were many shuls, beautiful shuls, probably nicer shuls than we have today. There were Rabbanim, there were Chazanim, but the heart of Yiddishkeit was not there. The Talmud Torahs were few and far in between. The amount of serious yeshivas could be counted on one hand. And yes, you had your Shraga Feivel Mendelovich, you had your Rabbi Yaakov Yosef, you had your Rabbi Binyamin Wilhelms, Zechariah Levracha. They planted the seeds, they built the foundations. So when the wave of immigrants came after World War II, they had what to build on. But for the most part, the existing Talmud Torah institutions were far and few in between. And most of Klal Yisrael fell through in that in between. Without Chedarim, without Chinuch, Altaras HaKodesh, without our Mesiras Nefesh and our emphasis being on where are we going to be Mechanech our children, then there is no Klal Yisrael. And basically that's what Rashi is teaching us over here. That's Yehuda Shalach L'fanav El Yosef, L'Hayret L'fanav Goshna. To be Mesakin Beis Talmud, says Rashi. Yaakov Avinu is leaving to Mitzrayim, the birth of Klal Yisrael. This is the beginning of Golus, to be followed by redemption, to be followed by a Mishkan and Kabbalah Satira. He's going to see his long-lost son after all these years. And who knows how much time Yaakov Avinu has left in order to get to Mitzrayim and see his son. Put everything aside. I'm not stepping in with any one of my grandchildren until there are yeshivas in place. Because without Talmud Torah, you have no Klal Yisrael. You have no future. Rabbi Binyamin Wilhelm, Zechariah Levracha, lived in Williamsburg, and he suffered from some type of asthmatic condition. And the doctors told him that unless he moves upstate to the clearer mountain air, his life would be temporary at best. And so they packed their bags, and they hired a truck, something that took many, many days to prepare, and they began the long and difficult trek up to the mountains where they had purchased the house. It was like 3 straight weeks of continuous labor, I heard from one of his grandchildren. And when they finally got to their place in the mountains, and everything was unpacked in their hut or their bungalow, which was going to serve as their house, Rabbi Binyamin went off to the local shul to daven mincha. And the people came in for the minyan. Most of them were wearing white pants. Their tennis rackets were hung up in the back. Some hung up their golf clubs. There were no young children. Only these older people. Where are your children? One is in California. One is a doctor in Harvard. The other is an engineer in Yale. Do you have any shaykhs with them? Some of them were still receiving Rosh Hashanah cards from them. Rabbi Binyamin finished mincha and came back, where his wife had just finished unpacking the boxes and said, "We're packing. We're going back to Williamsburg." But your life is in danger. But Binyamin said, "My life is in danger over here." And they packed their bags and returned the very same day. There is a Medrash Tanchuma. The Medrash Tanchuma says, "Yilamdeinu Rabbeinu." When is the right time to make the bracha on the Ner Matzah Shabbos? And the answer is Kach Shonu Rabbi Seinu Ein Mevarchen Al Ner Achi Yeusul Yoyroi. That you cannot make the Bayim Eish until you first derive some type of pleasure from the candle. And where do we learn this from? We learn it from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Vayar Elokim and Torah Kitayv continues the Medrash, and afterwards Vayavdel Elokim Dein Ha'or Uzein HaChoshech. In other words, only after Kaviyachol Hashem saw the Or Kitayv, teaching us the concept of deriving pleasure from the Or, only afterwards can the distinction be made Vayavdel Elokim Dein Ha'or Uzein HaChoshech, and we express that distinction between light and darkness in the form of our bracha and our gratitude of Bayim Na'uri Ha'esh. Then the Medrash goes on to a second aspect. Paragraph 2. Rav Shimon Bar Yochai teaches us. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Klal Yisrael, by you being mechabed my mitzvahs, by giving proper honor to my mitzvahs, you're giving honor to me, because the Kadosh Baruch Hu says that Shiluchei Shel Adam K'maisai, and the mitzvahs are an extension of myself. And by being mechabed the mitzvahs, you're being mechabed my messenger, and you are rewarded as if you were giving kavod to Hashem Himself. For that matter, someone who is mevav the mitzvahs, being mevav Hashem Himself. And the Medrash concludes, Ein lucha adam shekibed es ha-Torah ki Yaakov. There is no one who gave honor to the Torah like Yaakov Avinu, as the pasuk says, Yaakov ishtam yoshev oyhal. Now, this is one piece in the Medrash, and somehow all of this has to fit together. On the surface, it has no shaykhus to each other. What shaykhus does the Bayim Eish learn from the pasuk of Vayar Elokim es Or Kitayv has to do with general kavod for mitzvahs? And on top of that, where do we find this Medrash? In Parshas vayigash, on the pasuk of Yehuda was sent before the rest to build a yeshiva. What does Yehuda's building the yeshiva in Mitzrayim before the rest of the family gets there have to do with the Bayim Eish and general kavod for mitzvahs? The Medrash doesn't just pick psukim at random and discuss it. There has to be some connection to the pasuk. On the surface, doesn't seem to be any shaykhus over here. The Ben Moshe from the Yuzha weaves a beautiful thread through and around this Medrash that I would like to share with you, Liaz Hashem. If you really, really try to do a mitzvah, but you're unsuccessful, physically you could not carry out the mitzvah, fear not. Chazal dash in the pasuk l'choishvei shemai amar Ravashi chashav adam lasis mitzvah v'nenes v'lo yasa. The person tried to do a mitzvah, and some type of unavoidable occurrence happened that prevented him from fulfilling the mitzvah. Mala olav akasav ki yasa. The Torah considers it as if you indeed were mekayim the mitzvah. The way this works is that all of Klal Yisrael constitute one body, guf echad. And in a guf, when something is missing from one part, it could be replaced by another part. Like the Pri Etz Chaim, in the Shah HaSlichos Perek Ches, the Chaim the Tal, the greatest Talmud of the Rizal, explains. He says over there, as the Ber Moshe quotes it, Kol Yisrael him guf echad. All of Klal Yisrael is really one body. V'chol echad me Yisrael hu eiver echad prati. And every single individual in Klal Yisrael is a limb in this body. When someone's hand is fulfilling a mitzvah, it's not just his hand. It's not just your hand that takes the esrog. Your entire body is absorbed into the mitzvah of taking an esrog. So when one yid does a mitzvah, if there is another yid who also wants to do the mitzvah and wants to be part of Klal Yisrael, by extension, he himself is also doing the mitzvah, because I am part of the body of Klal Yisrael. And the Ber Moshe in Parshas vayigash elaborates on this more. We've mentioned this many times, that the Rosh Hashanah really Yosef the Torah, and every yid is embedded into one of the letters of the Torah, and the Torah that's missing one letter is completely possible. Now, with every mitzvah, there are two aspects to it. There is machshava and ma'isa. Just like the person himself is made up of two aspects, his physical guf and the neshama, which is the life of his guf. So every mitzvah has the ma'isa ha-mitzvah, and the machshava, the attitude toward the mitzvah, the cheshek, that's the neshama of the mitzvah. And indeed, if someone fulfills just the ma'isa mitzvah, there's no love, there's no feeling, there's no thought to it, says Baal Shem Tov, it's like a guf without a neshama. But not always is our machshava there and available to us. Sometimes we start a Shemoneh Esrei because it's time for mincha now, the clock says it's time for mincha, And we go through the motions, we step back, we bend forward, but our mind is just not there. So are those physical words that we uttered completely lost? Are they indeed lifeless and they have no meaning? Not necessarily. Even if a person doesn't have the proper enthusiasm or he cannot apply himself the way he should to the mitzvah, but if in doing the mitzvah he has one little sense that prevails in his heart, a sense of unity. I want to be part of Klal Yisrael, that as a whole is fulfilling this mitzvah. I am part of this Beis HaMedrash now that is davening to Hashem, and this Beis HaMedrash is part of all the other Batei Midrashim of Klal Yisrael, and we all reach out to the Divine Shalom. With that machshava alone, even in the absence of the proper thoughts and emotions that are necessary to the mitzvah, you have already elevated yourself into the category of, I am part of Klal Yisrael. And what happens is, by extension, someone else's good machshava and enthusiasm to the mitzvah applies itself to you as well. And that is pshat, as many of the Chassidish Sfarim say, according to Shem Rebbe Melech and others, machshava taiva, a good machshava, Kadosh Baruch Hu mitzvah l'mayim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sometimes takes one person's machshava and the other person's maisa and puts it together. One person does the maisa mitzvah, no real heart over there. Another person is craving to do the mitzvah, but he doesn't have a chance to do it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts the two together and says, I consider it as if you both did the mitzvah. But there has to be an overriding sense of, I want to be part of Klal Yisrael. That's why in the nusach of the L'Shem Yichud that we say prior to each mitzvah, the opening statement always begins with the Yehuda Shalim B'Shem Kol Yisrael. I want to be absorbed into the entity of Klal Yisrael. Once you do that, you're on the boat. Once you do that, you're on the ship. You're safe. Wherever the ship goes, you go. And that, of course, is the saving aspect of Tefillah B'Tzibur. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu most to Tefillah Shel Tzibur. If you feel you're part of the Tzibur, if you start that Shmoneh together with everyone with this sense, I want to be part of Klal Yisrael, B'Fe'einu, heal us, all of us here davening. Give us parnasa, all of us over here, all of the Tefillas are b'Lashon Rabim. So even when your mind wanders off, but you're still on the ship, regardless. Now, back to the connection of Aleph, Yehuda being sent to start the Yeshiva Mitzrayim. Beis making the Boyer Moyer Reish Matzah Shabbos, which is learned from the Pasuk of Yar Elikim Esuar Kitayim, and the general Inyan of Kavod for Mitzvahs. The Medrash seems to put all together. In order to answer this, the Ben Moshe first points out what the Medrash says in Bereshis. The Medrash says, when the HaKadosh Baruch Hu first created the world, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw the actions of Tzadikim, and the HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw the actions of Rishoyim. And the HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't know yet which one he wanted. However, with the words Vayar L'Kim Esuar Kitayim, a determination was made that the HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants the actions of Tzadikim, and he does not want the Masayim Shel Rishayim. So the obvious question is, what is even the Havamina to suggest that the HaKadosh Baruch Hu would want the acts of the Rishayim? So the Ben Moshe explains, we're not talking about Rishayim over here. We're just talking about two different types of Tzadikim. You have those that spend their days worrying about Klal Yisrael. What can I do to be Makarim, Levavis of Klal Yisrael? What can I do to strengthen Yiddishkeit? What can I do to help people in general? Then you have those that are completely isolated from the world and they work on themselves. In a mystical level, but they work exclusively on themselves. They have no connection whatsoever with anyone. The Medrash doesn't say HaKadosh Baruch Hu may want the Maisim of Rishoyim. The Medrash says HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks at those that are totally independent of Masayim Shel Rishoyim. These are people that say, look, I don't want to have anything to do with anyone. I'll just sit in my Daled Amos, I'll sit and learn from morning until night, I'll daven. I can't have any relationship with the outside world. It's going to affect me. I want to attain my lofty spiritual level. On the nation of the Alti Rosha B'Fnei Asmacha, the Bataduda says, Alti Rosha B'Dover Hazeh, Shetifresh Min HaTzibur V'Tamid B'Fnei Asmacha. So we see the term Rosha sort of gets applied to someone who wants to isolate himself from the world. Not that he himself is a Rosha, but he shows somewhat of an indifference to others who never Charashon because they don't know any better. And he makes no effort to teach, he makes no effort to try to be mashpia, or to try to at least emulate some type of a Kiddush Hashem, whereas others can learn from him. Vayar L'Kim Esuar Kitayim, R means a light that radiates outward, that shines, everyone sees from the light comes from the source. And this represents the tzaddik who says, no, I will do what I can to try to help others. Yehi Or, the Gemara says in Masechtas Yuma, Ze Avraham. Because Avraham Avinu was really the first that set out on a career of giving up his life to teach others. Vayal came into our Kitayv. This indicates to us HaKadosh Baruch Hu Chafetz B'Maaseh Tzadikim. That to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the greatest reward goes to those Tzadikim that are willing to give of themselves to teach others. The Tzadik who shines out to others and begins to warm the hearts of Klal Yisrael for each other and for Tshuva binds Klal Yisrael. And the greatest fringe benefit of this is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu begins to connect the various different components of everyone's positive character to form a mitzvah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes one person's ma'isa mitzvah, the other person's machshava to the mitzvah, and so on. And that's the connection over here. Yaakov Avinu refused to go to Mitzrayim until he knew that his Einiklach, his children, will be entering into an established area, a yeshiva, a ma'isa, a base of Talmud, that posts a sign outside and says, here is where Klal Yisrael comes to daven. Here is where Yidden come to make a statement and they say, I am part of Klal Yisrael and I care for others. Because Yaakov knew that once you have that type of an establishment, even if individuals go astray, they're still on the ship, they're still brought back. That's why Rashi says, what was Yehuda's job? To be Mesaken a base of Talmud. Chazal say, Gadol Talmud, what is the greatness of Talmud? Shemedi l'dei ma'isa. In other words, Talmud, learning Torah properly, means injecting into Klal Yisrael a feeling of, I want to go out and fulfill mitzvahs, I want to help others to do mitzvahs, and automatically, machshava and ma'isa becomes one. Where one is deficient, the other fills in, if that's the attitude. When do you make a bracha on the Ner Matzah Shabbos? The Ner of Matzah Shabbos represents Havdalah. The Havdalah is Ben Yisrael Yamin. It's our statement that we as Klal Yisrael, even though Shabbos is over now, we're all scattering off into our different workplaces, we remain as one unit. And we do so through the Kayach of the Tzaddik. That's the Ya'alakim to our Kitayv. And as a result, what happens? All of the mitzvahs of Klal Yisrael are joined together. I may do a mitzvah and they lack a little love. Yaakov Shmuel in Australia has a lot of love, but he doesn't have the opportunity of doing mitzvahs. We are binded together. Because of you, myself, not as an individual, but as a piece of the puzzle that makes up all of Klal Yisrael. The Bishop Zalman Nelser, Zechayim Levracha, was once preparing a class when suddenly his Rebbetzin, Be'ela Hinda, a great tzedekah in her own right, came running in and summoned her husband. Quick, quick, come into the kitchen. It wasn't a very far walk from the dining room to the kitchen. The Talmidim were frightened. It must be really something terrible that happened if the Rebbetzin would see fit to come interrupting her husband in the middle of preparing the class. So they came running into the kitchen to see if they can assist in this emergency. But they were a bit dumbfounded when they saw what the apparent emergency was. She pointed to the stove and said, kick. The milch hat sich gekauft. Each day the Mrs. Alma would drink a cup of warm milk, probably for lunch. She would heat up the milk on the stove, and today the milk boiled over. That was the great tragedy. The Mrs. Alma himself was a bit perplexed about this seemingly terrifying thing that happened, and he asked his Rebbetzin basically why, pardon the pun, why cry over spilled milk. And his Rebbetzin said that she's cooking this milk for over 40 years for him. And it never once happened that it boiled over. If it boils over today, then there's a reason that it boiled over, and we have to figure out why. Everything is Hashgacha Pratis, and nothing happens by chance. So Mrs. Alman said, no, what do you think? Why? And she said, that's why I summoned you here. That was the emergency. You should help me think. But it was the Rebbetzin again who suggested the answer. The Talmidim, however, couldn't hear what she said. By now they had stepped back. It seemed that the emergency was under control. But whatever the Rebbetzin had said to Rebbe Zalman, it must have been important, because Rebbe Zalman excused himself, put on his hat, and the two left the apartment to return about a half hour later. Rebbe Zalman sat down and continued hearing the class, testing the class as if nothing had happened. When they finally finished, Rebbe Zalman said to them, you probably want to know where we went. And everyone said, well, To be quite frank, we want to very much know where the Rosh Hashiva went. So Rabbi Zalman smiled and told them this is how his Rebbitzin touched up the situation. The milk boiled over. It had never boiled over in many decades. If it boiled over today, then there had to be a reason. Nothing happens unless there's Gacha process. It had to be a message from Shemayim. What was the message suggesting? Her solution? It seems that many years ago there was a certain Yid who made the rounds delivering milk. Then he retired. Someone else took over the milk delivery. Every Rosh Chodesh, the previous milkman used to come by and that's when they would pay him. Well, the next Rosh Chodesh he knocked on the door. Now the obvious question, but you're not delivering milk anymore, was never asked. Of course, if it is Zalman thought to himself, if Nebuchadnezzar has no Makayach to schlep the milk, he still has to survive. So the Rebbe Zalman and his Rebbetzin continued to pay him, even more so than they did beforehand, because now they assumed he may have lost some of his customers, being that he wasn't actually providing a service anymore. And sure enough, month after month, every Rosh Chodesh, he would come, knock on the door, as if he were still delivering the milk. Rebbe Zalman and his Rebbetzin would pay him, as if he were still delivering the milk. Well, that morning, it was Rosh Chodesh. Both Rebbe Zalman and his Rebbetzin were not home that morning because they had gone to a bris. When the Rebbetzin realized the milk boiled over, she was frightened. She said, there must be a message over Yemin HaShemayim, and if we don't read it, we're not going to be Masakin what we have to be Masakin. Her solution was, as she suggested to her husband, what probably happened is that the old milkman, or milkman emeritus, had come by, and no one was home. So he figured that it's Zalman and his Rebbetzin are probably fed up with paying him, being that he's not delivering milk anymore. And he probably walked home all upset, thinking, oh no, how am I going to live now? If people aren't going to pay me just because I'm not providing the service anymore. And he must be subrachan and worried, this poor old sick man. So the Rebbetzin said, we must go at once and pay him and comfort him and explain to him that he can come every Rosh Chodesh and we'll continue to pay him. The Rebbe Zalman smiled at his Talmidim and said, I want to tell you something. When my Rebbetzin first said it to me, and her panic about the milk boiling over and everything, in all due respect, and I have great respect for her, I thought this time maybe she's just taking it a bit too far. But experience has taught me that her intuition is better than mine. So instead of arguing, I agreed to go with her, even though I was in the middle of Saharing you. We came to the old man's house. We knocked on his door. He opened up the door, and there were tears streaming from his eyes. Suddenly his face lit up. He said, you did come to pay me? I was petrified all morning. I was crying. I thought I was going to starve. I thought that when I knocked on the door, you intentionally didn't answer. Rabbi Zalman explained to him, Chas v'shalom, we would always answer every year. We weren't home. We were by a bris, and of course we'll continue to pay you. After all, we have to show a karas hatov that you delivered the milk for so many years. So what if you can't deliver the milk anymore? That's not a reason to stop paying you. And so you see, he told us, Talmidim, my Rebbetzin understands all the messages in Shemayim. She reads into these things. Apparently even better than I do sometimes. With this story in mind, perhaps we can understand indeed a word that this same Rebbe Zalman Zochaim Levracha tells us on the week's Pasha. The Medrash says, the Shosha Tafaf Yosef at Binyamin, when Yosef grabbed Binyamin, and he said, he is going to be my slave. So Yehuda said, Binyamin you're taking for a slave? Is there going to be peace now in my father's house? Miyad Kos, Yehuda got angry. The Shag, the Koil Gada, and he roared with a tremendous voice. And his voice traveled 400 parsa until Hushim ben Dan heard and came running. Dr. Bissazal, Binyamin is the symbol of the innocent Jewish child. The child sometimes who really doesn't know of anything but politics, crises, complications, world events, rips him from the lap of his father and tears him away from the chinuch of his father, from the atmosphere of Kedusha, and he's thrust into a complicated world dominated by personal motivation, by ego, by politics, a world that is cruel, a world that looks to destroy any sense of morality, any feeling for Kedusha. And there are Jews that know about this, hear about this, and they give a krech. That's not right. And they turn the other side of the leaf and continue off their own world. Then you have the Yehudas in Klal Yisrael. Those special kinds of Yidden that are margish in the tremendous achrayus of Kol Yisrael Arevim Zelazeh. Ki Abdecha Orev Esanar. Yehuda had put his Olam Haba and his Olam Haba on the line. If Binyamin were not to be returned to his father's house, he had lost everything. There are Yidden that view things that way. When they see Yiddish children around them threatened to be lost, this is no geya to them. This is not just something that, oh, that's not nice. They feel, I have to dive into this. I have to do whatever I can to save the situation. What can I do to help? My life is on the line over here. I once had a parent who called me to discuss his child, and he said to me, I'm a stockbroker. And it's amazing. A person has a penny stock. A person has a couple of dollars invested, and he'll call him 1,000 times a day. He hears this room, he's frightened about that room, or, he may lose, it may go down. He doesn't sleep, he doesn't eat. And he says, look what I have invested with you. I have my child invested with you. And how often do I speak to you? Twice a year, 3 times a year. One would think it should be the other way around. And the truth is that this parent made a tremendous impression upon me in terms of how much time do I spend really worrying about my children. We all should think the same way. This is my whole life. This is our whole life. Are we doing enough? Are we being Meiser Nefesh ourselves to the greatest extent possible? The true Yehuda understands that his life is invested over here, and he is not going to let this Jewish child be lost because he's going to go down with him. And therefore no price is too much. And Yehuda asks, Shalom Beves Abba, can I turn the other cheek? Can I walk away from this and live a life when I know that there's a Jewish child in my midst that's going to be lost, that's being schlepped into an alien chinuch, that's being exposed to things that he ought not to be exposed to, and I am just going to sit back and say it's someone else's problem? The true Yehuda, explains the Bishop Zalman, is so hurt, is so moved by the threat of a Yid, of a Jewish child being lost to a chinuch alien from Torah, of being exposed to an environment contrary to Kedusha, that he screams so loud. His inner soul roars so high that even Chushim, Ben Dan, even those that are naturally, spiritually deaf, are awoken. Even they are motivated to come running, to come and see, what can I do to help? And if we think about it, this word from Mr. Zalman is very consistent with the story. Things happen in our life. Things happen around us. People need help. People need a warm word. People need to be invited for a Shabbos. Children need to be invited for a Shabbos. Our own children may need rebellion. They need extra help. It may require some Mesiras Nefesh. We need time for our own children. But there are so many other things happening in my life. So many distractions, so many opportunities. It's all a question of what your priorities are. To some people, milk that boils over is something very trivial. Why cry over spilled milk? It happened. To others, everything is a message. What is the Divine Hashem telling me over here? What have I done wrong today? What has to be corrected? Who is being lost? Who could be saved if I would only care? If it would only be Negeya Benashi, if I would only understand, like Yehuda understands, Ki Avdecha Orav Esanah, that Kol Yisrael Arevim Zelazeh, that whether we like it or not, we are all guaranteers for each other. Now when Yosef revealed himself to the Shvatim, they were frightened. And Yosef told them, Kshuna alai v'yigashu, v'yoyman Yosef v'chichem Hashem echatim eisim Mitzrayma. Such Rashi. He saw that they were frightened. See? So he wanted to convince them, don't worry, he's the same Yosef HaTzadik. He gave them different simonim. One of the simonim that he gave them was, Kifi HaMedaber Alech. You see him speaking to you Lashon Kodesh. That proves that I must be a tzaddik. I'm not going to hurt you, that I'm Yosef. Okay, does that mean that anyone who speaks Lashon Kodesh automatically is to be considered a tzaddik? And of course there's the old kasha. Pari knew all the languages except Lashon HaKodesh. This was an obsession. And this was something Pari always had to look behind his back to make sure no one knows this. This was the great secret. If the newspapers found out about this, that he doesn't know Lashon HaKodesh, if this scandal would hit the streets, Pari, who knows what could happen to his throne? So much so he has to make a swear that he's not going to tell anyone he doesn't know Lashon HaKodesh. Now the truth is, the Hebrew it may not be from the easiest languages in the world to learn, but at the point that you're already fluent in 70 other languages, how come Pari didn't know Lashon HaKodesh? How come no one can teach him Lashon HaKodesh? Especially if he felt it was such a threat to his very kingship. Nachum Sefer explains, when we say Lashon HaKodesh, we don't mean Hebrew, we don't mean Digduk. Lashon HaKodesh means Shenas HaKodeshim. Lashon HaKodesh means a special language that tzaddikim have between each other. Like birds have a language between each other that no one else understands, tzaddikim are perceptive to certain things that happen in this world. Lashon HaKodesh, as the Mesillas Yesharim explains and many others, is the absolute of things. Adam Harishon gave names to all of the animals, and he had to pick the right name. When Adam Harishon called a cow a parah, it's because in the letters Pei, Reish, Hey are the tzirufim that create the existence of the entity of a cow, as opposed to other languages, which are just codes. We call a table because you have to call it something else. How would you know we're referring to a table? But in Lashon HaKodesh, when you say shulchan, the letters shin, lamed, ches, and endon contain the very essence of what a table represents. Understanding Lashon HaKodesh means you look at something and you see through and through what this is, what you're supposed to do with it. Pari may have known Hebrew, but he didn't know Lashon HaKodesh. He didn't have an insight into truly understanding that when milk boils over, that means someone was hurt. There's a message here in Hashanayim. You can buy olam haba and chas v'shalom, the lack of such, depending on your response. And how many times a day in our life does milk boil over? How many times do we run into little frustrations in life? And each of these frustrations represent either golden opportunities to be oila l'gedula, to save a person's life, to acquire Gan Eden forever, or chas v'shalom, the opposite. But they pass by us. We don't read them. We don't understand what they mean. We don't get the message because we don't know Lashon HaKodesh. That was the great tragedy, says the Chaim Sofer, when they translated the Torah for Talmei HaMelech, because now they thought that they know. We have a Hebrew dictionary now. We can translate the words, but they didn't know. They had a dry translation. They didn't see the essence of Torah, but they thought that they did. And thinking that you know something when you don't is probably the most dangerous thing in the world. And that was the whole essence of Yosef HaTzadik. Yosef HaTzadik, more so than anyone else, understood Lashon HaKodesh. Safnas Paneach, Pari, called him, the one who reveals the hidden things. Everyone else sees cows, big cows, little cows. One swallows the other, but no one understands what it means. Yosef HaTzadik sees through and through. Pari understood it wasn't just that Yosef HaTzadik knew how to interpret the dream. Yosef HaTzadik looks at everything that happens in his life. Every milk that boils over, every cup that spills, every frustration, every little worry, every little hope. And he sees through and through. He sees what the message is and what the Rebbeinu Shalom wants us to do in order to correct it. And that's what everything gets corrected. Pari knew Lashon HaKodesh is beyond him, and he didn't want anyone else to realize this. When Yosef HaTzadik wanted to reveal himself to his brothers and to explain to them that it wasn't just anger, it wasn't just kina, it was Vasher, you should sell me to Mitzrayim, I have to come here to pave the way for Klal Yisrael. So what did he tell them? You see him speaking to you Lashon HaKodesh. I see through and through this. It wasn't you who sold me to Mitzrayim. It was Hashgacha that brought me to Mitzrayim. I'm not angry at you. You need not fear me. I don't look at milk when it boils over as just milk. I look at its message. I look at the reason, and I solve the problem. You sold me to Mitzrayim. You were all just shluchim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent me here to pave the way, to establish guidelines of Kedusha for Klal Yisrael in Galus until Mashiach comes. I'm not angry at you, because I don't see over here an act of hatred between brothers. I speak Lashon HaKodesh and I understand Lashon HaKodesh. I see everything in a different light. a language that the Shvatim understood, and a language that the Shvatim could communicate with Yosef with, and a language that proved to them this had to be Yosef. In conclusion, the Chavetz Chaim says, the Shvatim couldn't figure out for the life of them what was happening. All they wanted to do was to buy some food, and here they are, they're being accused as spies. The whole Mitzrayim, the world power is turning around this. Nothing here in the chain of events makes any sense whatsoever until Yosef the Tzaddik says two words, Ani Yosef, and suddenly all of the thousands of kashas are for answering. It may be difficult for us in Galus, as individuals, as a rabbi, but Liyasid Lavai Hashem will say two words, says the Chavetz Chaim, Ani Hashem, and all questions will be answered. It is said that a chassid once came to the Kotzker Rebbe and, well, didn't outright complain, but sort of gave a crest. His children were raised in a very comfortable environment. He worked hard and long hours to provide for them. Now, in his old age, he didn't really feel that they were responding in kind. He had depleted much of his assets. He was struggling, and, well, this man was expecting something back from his children, and he wasn't quite getting it, or at least he wasn't getting it in the manner that he thought was due to him. The Kotzker told him, don't be surprised. When Yehuda was pleading that Yosef let Binyamin go back, what did Yehuda say? He said, what is going to be with our father Yaakov when he sees that Binyamin did not return? So the Kotzker, look at this. Yehuda is asking Yosef to have Rachmanis on the old father. What's going to be when he doesn't see his son? Why didn't he ask Yosef to have Rachmanis on Binyamin's 10 sons that wouldn't see their father? Elamar Yehuda, who was trying to win the affection of Yosef, was looking for what would be the greater heartbreak, the greater pain. And apparently the pain that a father has over a child is not as much as a child has over a father. There is a Weltsvart, one father can support 10 sons, but 10 sons can't support one father. And really it's the Gemara in Masechtas Sotah. The Gemara says, V'havas ha'av al habanim, and v'yahavas habanim is al b'neim, on their sons. The emphasis, the great Gaon, the Yosef, say that it's partially why it's this way. The love that a father has to a child, the love that a parent has to a child is natural. It's part of the essence of a human being. It's handed down from generation to generation. So we have to go back to the first generation. Adam Arishan had a natural love for his children, but Adam Arishan had no natural father. So this Metzias in Teva of natural love from one generation to the other is more so from father to child as it would be from child to father. And it's partial. That's why there's a mitzvah of kibbut aveim, and there's no mitzvah per se of kibbut av l'bana. Because the feeling that the child should be honored, that's natural. Every parent sheps nachas when the child is oila l'gdula. However, the other way around, there is no natural drive, or at least there isn't as much a natural drive. And therefore, the Torah says, you do it. Do it l'shem mitzvah. The mitzvah is supposed to take the part of nature. HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed for this gap in nature, that is the discrepancy between the love that a parent has to a child as opposed to the love that a child has to a parent, so that a person should be mekayim it b'teres sivui Hashem yisbarach. So in the final analysis, there has to be the same appreciation to the parent as there is from the parent, except that from the parent it comes naturally, it comes biologically. And from the child it has to come b'teres mitzvah. Now later on, when Yosef and Yaakov meet, the pasuk says, "V'yirei Elav," and he appeared to him, "V'yipol al tzavarav, v'yevk al tzavarav oin." Yosef fell on his father and he began to cry. It doesn't say, however, that Yaakov reciprocated. Rashi tells us, "Avol Yaakov lo nafal al tzavar Yosef." Yaakov didn't fall on Yosef's neck, and Yaakov didn't even kiss Yosef. Why such a lack of emotion? Why so cold? Stuck Rashi, V'yamur Rabbi saying, no, listen, Yaakov Avinu was busy. She'akayah Shema, he was reciting Shema at that moment. Now, of all times to recite Shema, he didn't see his son for almost 2 decades. Right now, he couldn't do it a minute before or a minute after. Or maybe it was the end of his man Kriya Shema, but still. Why would Yaakov Avinu wait until the end of his man? Surely Yaakov Avinu recited Shema at the earliest possible time. The Maral, the famous verse from the Maral in the Sefer Gur Aryeh, this was a different kind of Shema. during this greatest moment of Ahava, while the love within him would rise to a crescendo, during the most dramatic, emotional moment of his life, his reunion with Yosef, Yaakov Avinu made a decision. He wanted to direct all of that Ahava to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not to his son. Not that he was going to be cold to his son. But as explained earlier, the love from a father to a son is a natural love. And Yaakov Avinu gave away his nature to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The outpouring of love, the manifestation of his Ahava, he wanted that to go to Hashem, and that is why at this point he said Shema. He controlled his emotions, and instead of showing the love to his son, he said, V'yahavtas Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha b'chol nafshecha b'chol ni'aytecha. And that's what it means that he was reciting Shema. Which leads us to the question, how come Yosef HaTzadik didn't respond in the same manner? Yosef HaTzadik did physically show his love to his father. He fell at his father's neck. He cried. Entered the Sefer Birchas Peretz, basically based on what we were saying till now. Yosef HaTzadik had a mitzvah of kibbud av. His outpouring of love, his physical demonstration of ahava, of how he missed his father, was within the guidelines of the mitzvah of kibbud av. And therefore he was serving Hashem in this manner. It was not necessary for him to redirect his love, so to speak, or to curtail, at least in a physical sense, his outpouring of emotion. Adarabah. His outpouring of emotion toward his father was driven by the mitzvah of kibbud av. Now the Chidush Yerim says that in general, Yosef HaTzadik had trained himself in Mitzrayim to act one way for the public eye, for the press, and his heart was always directed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Yosef HaTzadik could physically, on the outside, show his emotion, act in the way that people would think he would act, and in the inside, he was saying Shema. That was something that the years of Mitzrayim trained him to do. Yaakov Avinu was already aloof of that. He was aloof of this world. Even in a physical sense, even in an outward expression of his emotions. Everything was directed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And turning to perhaps a more technical perspective of this, let's try to understand this in lieu of the fact that Itaka was his man Kriya Shema. The earliest time to say Shema, or rather the lechatchila time to say Shema, the best possible time to say the Shema of the morning is Kivasikin. And that means the Shema right before sunrise, and the Shemoneh Esrei begins simultaneously with sunrise. There's a special Shmira for people who daven Vasikin. So let's just imagine for a moment, or suggest, that it just so happened, this was the Hashgacha Pratis, Yaakov Avinu would meet Yosef exactly at the time of Vasikin. And Yaakov was always makbid to say Shema right before Netzach Hama, and Shemoneh Esrei simultaneously with Netzach Hama, and therefore, I know Yosef HaTzadik, I've been crying for you for more than 20 years, but right now it's time to say Shema, I say Shema. And Yaakov's heart and mind are completely directed toward that Shema. He is unfazed by the drama of the moment. What about Yosef HaTzadik? Well, you don't have to say Shema at the time of a Vasikin. You have the first 3 hours of the day. You're not supposed to delay the Shema, but Yosef HaTzadik, seeing his father and displaying this shower of love and emotion toward his father, Yosef HaTzadik is engaged in the mitzvah of kibbud av, and oisik b'mitzvah patur min ha-mitzvah. If he doesn't show the love to his father now, then he misses this particular mitzvah. So he can say Shema afterwards. But Yaakov Avinu understands that the outward show of love to his son, if it's not in a gather of chinuch, which it wouldn't be in this particular case, Yaakov Avinu says, I don't have a mitzvah of kibbud benoi. And therefore, my mitzvah is to say Shema now. However, there's a vart from Rav Chaim, which is in a way the same vart, except from another perspective. He says it was past the time of the Vasikin. And that's why Yosef HaTzadik had already said Shema before he encountered his father. How come Yaakov didn't say Shema until now? Because the Kadosh Baruch Hu had told Yaakov Avinu to go down to Mitzrayim. It was a tzibur Hashem. Kadosh Baruch Hu says, "V'anochi ered imcha Mitzrayim." Like it says in the Agada, "Anas al pi adibur." So he had a tzibur to go down, and the halacha is Isaac the mitzvah. If someone is Isaac in one mitzvah, he's parcher on another mitzvah. So as Yaakov is traveling to Mitzrayim, he is concentrating on the chiyuv. I am going now to Mitzrayim because Hashem told me to go. And all this time he doesn't say Shema because Isaac the mitzvah partim in the mitzvah. The time of a seeking comes and goes. Yaakov is Isaac in the mitzvah. Hashem told him to go down to Mitzrayim. Now once he already enters through the gates of Mitzrayim, he completed the mitzvah. At this very moment, in all due respect to Yosef HaTzadik, the son that his heart melted for, the son that his heart yearned for, the son that his heart wept for, but right now, once he concluded officially the mitzvah of coming into Mitzrayim because he already entered Mitzrayim, he reverts back to the mitzvah of Shema. Whereas Yosef HaTzadik already said Shema. Now Yaakov Avinu's first words to Yosef HaTzadik are also interesting. Vayomi Yisrael Yosef Amusa Apar. He says, now he can die. Since I have seen your face and you're alive. Doesn't the Gemara tell us, asks of Yeshua Leib Diskin, Al Tiftach Pel Satan, person should not talk in this manner? Answer of Yeshua Leib, when a person says Shema, he's supposed to be Mechavin, that he's willing to be Ma'asenavish himself completely for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, I may have a life where everything is going my way, it's just wonderful, it's just perfect, and the Yid has an opportunity of Mesilas Nefesh, and he accepts that Mesilas Nefesh with love. That was difficult for Yaakov Avinu to do in the absence of Yosef HaTzadik. He was in such great pain, regardless. He couldn't be Mechavein. I want to take this life which is going so good for me, and I want to be Ma'asenavish myself for Hashem Yisbarach. There was a terrible sorrow that one of the 12 Shvatim were missing. So of course he davened, of course he said Shema. But because of his great sorrow, it wasn't that Mesiras Nefesh by Shema that Yaakov Avinu would have liked. Now that he saw Yosef HaTzadik and he had been appeased, now that he saw Yosef HaTzadik and he had a reason to live, now that he saw Yosef HaTzadik and his spirit had returned to him, so his initial response was, Amusa Apar. Now I can say Kriya Shema with true Mesiras Nefesh, willing to give up my life to Hashem Yisbarach. Now I can say it with full color, with real kavanah, because I was zeicha to see you. The Aldus in Kellam used to teach, David HaMelech says, Ahavti, ki yishma Hashem es tachnunai. I express a special love to Hashem, because the Kadosh Baruch Hu has heard me cry to him. Now the term tachnunai means when a person is in trouble and he's mispalel and the Kadosh Baruch Hu helps him. And for that, David HaMelech offered his love to Hashem. The emphasis, if someone caused you a problem, and at the end, he solved the problem. The one who caused you the problem is the one who solved the problem. So, you have a certain sense of gratitude that he solved the problem, but of course there is also a certain sense of resentment. Why did you start the problem to begin with? If someone Rahman al-San is in an Eis Tzar, and he saves in the Eis Tzar, so he'll thank Hashem. But then again, there may be a line of reasoning, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu, everything is you, everything is Hashgacha Pratis. Why did you give me the problem to start with? So David HaMelech says, whatever you do is good. And whatever experience I had to go through, that was for my best. But that's a separate issue, why I have to go through it. I thank you, Hashem, that now I am a better person for it. Because now, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that you help me, that you listen to my tefillah, I have a greater appreciation. I have a greater gratitude in my heart for this menuchas hanefesh, because I know what it means when you don't have it. So on the contrary, if a person has a difficulty breathing, and suddenly the problem is solved and it can breathe easier, so he appreciates every breath. He understands what it means, what Chazal say, Al kol neshima v'neshima tahal ka, that every breath is a gift of Hashem Yisbarach. And if a person really had seichel, he may venture even to think that it was only because he had this problem that it was difficult for him to breathe. that he now feels the sense of appreciation which everyone ought to feel with every breath. Yaakov Avinu went through the horrors of Alai. Alai kililavcha b'ni. Alai the Gra, and then the others say is Rashi Tevos, Esav, Lavan, Yosef. So Yaakov Avinu had a difficult life, to say the least. He survived Lavan, he survived Esav, and he suffered all these years thinking that Yosef Atzadik was not with him. And Yosef Atzadik is a king in Mitzrayim. One may chas v'shalom think that there was a sense of resentment over here on part of Yaakov Avinu, as if to say, thank you Hashem, that I now once again am zeicher to see Yosef, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu, why did you do this to me? And therefore Yaakov Avinu wanted to make it very clear that there is no resentment in his heart to Hashem Yisbarach. He didn't want his crying over Yosef to be misconstrued, that chas v'shalom, in the most minuscule way, he has any one of a taina against Hashem Yisbarach. The years of pain that he was separated from Yosef Atzadik, the years of pain that as a result of the Sar he was separated from the Shechina Gdosha, Yaakov Avinu accepted all of that with love. And that perhaps is another inyan in Yaakov Avinu's reciting of Shema at this very moment. A complete expression of ahava to Hashem Yisbarach. Let no one chas v'sholom think that there is any degree of taina in his heart. Hashem Yisbarach, if Yosef Atzadik was alive all these years, why couldn't you tell me? Why did you let me suffer? I had to go through the experience that I did. I'm a better person for it. For whatever reason, this is how the future of Klal Yisrael would have to be shaped. And I have nothing but pure, crystal clear gratitude to you, Hashem Yisbarach. I, the Yisurim, the pain, when he gets to Olam Haba, the world that lasts forever, the world that is real, the pain that he suffered down here will not be a factor. On the contrary, there is no greater matana that a person has when he gets up to Shemayim than the Yisurim that he suffered down here in this world. The Gehenim discount for Yisurim is something that is beyond value, explains the Chofetz Chaim. And therefore Yaakov Avinu says, look, my attitude now is a musapa. Now I'm ready to go up to Olam Haba and to cash in my Yisurim, my pain that I had down here in this world. I have no tainas chas v'sholom that I suffered, adarabba. My heart is full of ahava, full of a sense of a karas atayv that I now have seen Yosef Atzadik, and in terms of my past suffering, I thank you, Hashem. I look at the Yisurim as the greatest asset that a person can possibly have. Even the smallest of frustrations are charged against the person's Gehenna. In other words, he has less punishment because of it, because he already suffered down here in this world. Even reaching into your pocket and thinking you lost the key for a moment, oh no, and then you find it, shoo. The Gemara says even that second of frustration is also counted. Trying to get your hands into a sleeve and it doesn't go. That's also counted against your Gehenna if a person responds to it properly. If a person does not get angry, but says, the Kadosh Baruch Hu, I know whatever you do is good, and I accept it with love. And that is what Yaakov Avinu was teaching us over here. He was teaching us the attitude a Yid has to have during his suffering, and the attitude a Yid has to have when the Hashem Yisbarach's suffering will be over. Yes, Yehuda Shalach Lefanav Al Yosef Lehoyros Lefanav Goishna, Rashi tells us, L'saken Lo Beis Talmud, Yehuda was sent ahead of Yaakov Avinu and his entourage to start a yeshiva. Shemisham Teitzei Hayra. So Yidden should have a Meir Derech, Yidden should be able to have Hadracha. Without a yeshiva, Yaakov Avinu and his entourage could not come to Mitzrayim. It didn't make a difference that he hadn't seen Yosef all of these years. Now, we understand that very well. America saw wave after wave of generations totally wiped out from Yiddishkeit because while big, beautiful shuls were coming up in every corner, yeshivas were almost non-existent. But the question is, why was it so necessary for Yaakov Avinu to send Yehuda ahead? I mean, why couldn't they start the yeshivas once they got there? And the answer is explained in Sefer Emunah Tzitecha. Yaakov Avinu was really giving us lessons how to view Galus. Yaakov Avinu was not going to Mitzrayim in his own eyes. Yaakov Avinu was traveling to the Beis HaMedrash of Yehuda, that right now happens to be in Mitzrayim. Had this embassy of Torah not been set up in Mitzrayim, then Yaakov Avinu could have not possibly gotten himself to leave Eretz Yisrael. And Yaakov Avinu is explaining to us that regardless of where a Yid is sent in the course of his life, regardless of where Klal Yisrael finds themselves in the saga of Galus, you should know, you're really going to the Beis HaMedrash. Sometimes you're zecher to be in Eretz Yisrael. And even when you have to leave Eretz Yisrael, then you are going to Yehuda's Beis HaMedrash someplace. Even if that someplace happens to be in Mitzrayim. And that's why the Sefer Emunah Tzitecha explains Pashas vayigash always comes after Chanukah. As we leave Chanukah, we're also entering into a Galus, at least a chronological Galus in terms of time. We enter into what the Sfarim HaKadoshim refer to as the Leilei Teves U'Aruchem, the long dark nights of Teves. And the Chodesh Teves itself, which is known to be the Shlita of the Samach Mem. Teves historically has not been a good time for Klal Yisrael. The Zohar HaKadosh tells us that Esav has a koyach over a month and a half in the winter as well as a month and a half in the summer. The month and a half in the summer is Tammuz and half of Av. The month and a half in the winter that Esav has his strongest koyach is Teves and half of Shvat. Now, if a parent has to guide a child through a long dark tunnel, so at least what is done for the child? You have a huge big light that shines for him at the beginning of the tunnel, that extends as far as possible. And you also have waiting for him a huge big light that shines at the end of the tunnel to greet him on the other side. At least this way, he's never 100% in darkness. Or he knows, at least in the back of his mind, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there to protect him. There are two Yamim Tovim that are like flashlights into dark tunnels. These are the two Yamim Tovim that are weekday Yamim Tovim, where the bedavka is no Isser Melacha, because it's a weekday, yet it has the Kedusha of Yom Tov. These are lights into dark tunnels. These two Yamim Tovim are Chanukah and Purim. Chanukah is the light into the tunnel to help us make our way, wind our way through the long dark winter, and Purim is the light that awaits us at the end of the tunnel on the other side. That is why Pashas vayigash is read right after Chanukah. Pashas vayigash is Yaakov Avinu's descent into Galus, but Yaakov reminds us that there is a Beis HaMedrash. There is a place that already is a light tower for us, even in the darkest of Galus, that has been prepared by HaKadosh Baruch Hu for us to survive and to feel the presence of the Rebbeinu Shalom regardless of where we are. Now, the pasuk says, "L'kulam nasam le'ish chalifos malais." Yosef gave clothes, different changes of clothing, different sets of clothing, royal clothing to all of the Shvatim. However, Binyamin nasan shloish meis kesef v'chamesh chalifos malais. So to Binyamin he gave so much more than the other brothers. And the Gemara Masechtas Megillah, oh no, Yosef HaTzadik is starting all the tzaras again. Because of some extra silk, because of a shirt, a garment that Yosef HaTzadik had, the brothers were jealous of him, and the whole ishtalshlus hadvarim, the whole chain of events was triggered that left Yosef in Mitzrayim. And now after it's finally all solved and he revealed himself to his brothers, Yosef is starting it again by giving Binyamin more than the other brothers. And for the Gemara in Megillah, no, that's not what Yosef meant. He didn't mean to give Yosef more. He merely meant to be meramis him that Mordechai HaTzadik is in the command of Binyamin, where the pasuk says, Mordechai Yatzim Lifnei HaMelech Bilavush Malchus, and the pasuk lists 5 different types of garments: Tcheles, Chur, the Ateres of Gedolah, Sachus Butz, the Agama. Fine, but how does it answer the kasha? Yosef HaTzadik knew how much trouble that extra baggage that he had caused him, how it created all of the social strife between him and his brothers. So, fine, he was meramis that Mordechai HaTzadik is in the command of him wearing all of these royal clothes. But he was still starting the same problem again by giving Binyamin more than the other brothers. Now the Gra says that the 5 begadim that he gave to Binyamin in value equaled the single beged that he gave to each of the other brothers. The Emunah Tzitecha explains, what's the pasuk right afterwards in the Megillah? Really, there was a different message over here. The Yidden were not impressed with Mordechai's beautiful clothes. The fact that Mordechai was dressed in the most royal clothes and he had the most beautiful crown, that didn't make a single Yid proud. No one had any extra respect for Mordechai because of his majestic clothes. As far as the Yidden were concerned, what was the source of their joy, of their simcha? The pasuk says right afterwards, La Yehuda Ma'isa Oila v'Simcha v'Sasa v'Yikar Chazal Darshan Oila Toila Simchas Yamtev Sasainis Mila Yikar Tefillin. But you have to understand the connection between these two psukim. The Yidden saw Mordechai's rise in the king's palace as a means of them being able to be Mekayim Torah even in Galus. Until now they were persecuted, until now they were threatened, and now Baruch Hashem, Mordechai has this extra stature in the king's court, and he has all of these Levushei Malchus representing his power and prestige. So Baruch Hashem, La Yehuda Ma'isa Oyer v'Simcha v'Sasa v'Kar, the Yidden will be able to have Torah and Yom Tov and Milah and Tefillin. That's how the Yidden looked at this. We'll be able to build yeshivas, we'll be able to mechanech our children now, because Mordechai HaTzadik is there to help us. So as far as the newspaper pictures were concerned, the Melech press entourage was impressed with his levush malchus of chelis v'chur. But La Yehudim, the Yidden, they couldn't care less about what Mordechai was dressed and about his attire. They only saw this as a means of fulfilling, of feeling the ayah and simcha and sas and the Yikar mitzvahs. And this was the remes that Yosef Atzadik wanted to give to the brothers. It was a bracha. The Klal Yisrael should be raised to the madrega, where all of their gashmias is seen only as a platform to fulfill Torah and mitzvahs, and as a result, the jealousy, the strife, the terrible machlokes that comes along with the dollar bill should be batul mavatul. Binyamin's 5 beautiful layers of clothing, for all practical purposes, was equal to the one set of clothes that the Shvatim had. In other words, it no longer represented a difference between them, because they were all using it for the same purpose. The Shvatim had their regular clothes that represented the wholesomeness of Klal Yisrael, the Kiddush of Klal Yisrael, that is not particularly impressed or is not supposed to be impressed by clothes. As the Emunah Sitacha points out, when Chazal darshan from the pasuk the importance of clothes on Shabbos, so Chazal say v'chibaret, they honor Shabbos. B'ksus Nikiya, with clean clothes. It doesn't say with gaudy clothes, with majestic kingly clothes. Honor Shabbos with fresh, clean clothes. So this is what Yosef is saying to the brothers. He says, you misunderstood me all along. You took my dreams of Malchus as a way of me separating myself from you, severing my relationship from you. And you're going to be subservient to me. Adarabba. My kavanah with Malchus is the Malchus that you see manifesting for yourself right now. I'm going to use my influence and my power to be able to create a base of Kedusha here in Mitzrayim. I'm serving you with this Malchus. I'm not asking you to be impressed with my Malchus. The Melech and his press corps, they were impressed with the Levush Malchus Chelis V'chor. But what's important is that as a result of Mordechai's influence, La Yehuda Ma'isa Oyer v'Simcha v'Sasa v'Yikar, they were able to live with the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. Zok the Gra, it's all the same. Binyamin's 5 clothes was equal to the Shvatim's 1 set of clothing, because his clothing didn't represent him being better than they are. It represented an ability for him to be able to serve them. And this is our key to Hatzlacha in Galus. If we view Hatzlacha, whether it's financial success, prestige, honor, politics, if we view our ascent in terms of influence in Galus as an independent factor, then we're doomed for. Then we're finished. Then it's only going to isolate us from the Goyim. It won't bring us any closer to them. It is only going to fan the flames of hatred within them. It is not going to make them respect us. But if we take whatever influence and power that we have, and in a way of Kiddush Hashem, we try to use that to represent Kiddusha, and to bring Torah to the hearts of Klal Yisrael, to bring Simcha and Sasa and Zakar, then we have a chance to survive in Galus. Then we understand how to take the Hatzlachas of Galus and use it for our benefit. This was Yosef's lesson of how to be a melech in Mitzrayim, and this was his message for the future. And this is the Chanukah that shines at the beginning of the tunnel, and the Purim that shines at the end of the tunnel. Both weekday Yom Tovim were presenting Kiddusha even in the darkest of tunnels. I once heard a beautiful shot from Rabbi Yaakov by Yeshua Brachas. The pasuk says, "V'yidaberu elav es kol divrei Yosef asher divrei aleim." They came back. They told Yaakov Yosef is alive. They told him about the gifts. They told him about Yosef's instructions. V'yarasu hagolos, and he saw the wagons. He saw the royal wagons of Sholach Yosef, to carry him about the chi ruach Yaakov aviyim. The Ashura of Shechina settled on him. The Ruach HaKodesh came back to him because now, once again, Yaakov Avinu had simcha. Zot Rashi, Siman Masa Lahem. Yosef Tzaddik gave the Siman to the brothers so that Yaakov should believe that indeed it is he. His Siman was, remember, Father, what we spoke about the last time we were together, when you had accompanied me. We discussed the Pasha of the Egla Arufa. Now, Egla Arufa, as we know, is a Chas V'Shalom. A dead body is found in between two towns, and it's unclear who the murderer was. So the Beis Din of both towns have to come out. They have to chop off the head of the calf. They have to say, Yedeinu lo shavchas adam hazeh. There's a certain zidui process. There are issues that are brought up on the table. Was this person given the proper respect when he left the town? Did the people accompany him? Were they malava him? Perhaps had they gone along with him, he would have survived. This terrible tragedy would have not happened. He wouldn't have been attacked. That's the Pasha of Eglaruf. And that's what Yaakov Avinu was discussing with Yosef. And now, Vayaras Agolis, Sholach Yosef. When Yaakov Avinu sees the wagons referring to the Pasha of Eglarufa, to Yosef Atzaddik's message, remember, Father, what we spoke about last, that the Chi Ruach Yaakov Avinu. And Yaakov explained, for Yaakov to hear that his son was alive and that he was a king in Mitzrayim, that wouldn't necessarily appease him. A king in Mitzrayim? This was not Yaakov Avinu's dream. When Yaakov Avinu was mispal for good children every single morning, when he said, "Lo yomesh atera mipicha mipizaracha and pizar zaracha," he was never mispal that his son should become a king in Mitzrayim. And who knows under what influence he is? Who knows how the environment had an effect on him? This was not necessarily good news for Yaakov Avinu, that his son was a king in Mitzrayim. So therefore Yosef sent a very important message. Why is it that Dafka, the Beis Din of both towns, have to come out, and they have to go through a certain sense of really bizayon, to humiliate themselves, standing over here and saying, no, it's not our fault. We'll do our best in the future to be mechanech l'dar, to treat people properly. It's a terrible tragedy that this person was killed. What do you want from the Beis Din? Why did they have to come out? They didn't kill this person. Why do they have to go through the whole process over here with the Egla Rufa? And the answer is, because we don't look at power, we don't look at leadership as a sense of I am aloof of the other people. Faket, the Torah views Malchus as a tremendous responsibility. You're the Gadol Hadar, you're the Rav, you have the power to speak to people, then you have to stand up to the responsibility of being Mechanech Hadar. And if people don't treat each other properly and as a result someone lost his life, then we hold the Gedolim responsible. That's what the Torah is saying. They have to come in and reevaluate their whole mechanech process. Are we going far enough? Is it intense enough? Is it being applied correctly? Malchus, in the view of the Torah, is a tremendous achrayus. It doesn't lift the person on a pedestal to separate him from the people. It lifts the person on the pedestal with the achrayus. Now you have to look down and make sure things are going okay. Yes, the Torah says that the people have to honor the Melech, but there's one sole purpose for that, so that the Melech has greater influence and his sphere of power is strengthened so he can be Mechanech L'Dar better. And that is why, by design, Yosef HaTzadik wanted that when Yaakov hears the message, he is a king in Mitzrayim, it should come simultaneously with the message, and Father, I remember the Pasha of Eglaruf. Don't think for one moment that I am resting over here in my environment of Malchus and laughing and saying, what gullus, what sorrows, what trouble. I'm the most powerful person in the world, basking in the greatest luxury the world can possibly imagine. I'm a Mishnah Melech and Mitzrayim. Chasul Ahasker, Father, I know that the more power I have, the more influence I have, then the more responsibility I have. I remember well the lesson of the Egla Rufa that you taught me. So look at the psukim. First they told him, Yaakov is not impressed. So Yaakov by Kilai Hamelad. But the Yidabru Elavas called Diva Yosef, then they gave over Yosef's Musashmus. They gave over how Yosef explained to them what Malchus is all about. Vayarasu Agolis, and he saw the Egla Arufa, he saw Yosef remembered well that last lesson. Vayarasu Agolis Ashasholach Yosef Losei Soisoi, to carry him. Yosef said, my Malchus means I now have to carry Klal Yisrael. I have to use my koiches and my influence to create yeshivas, to be mechanech adar, and I know I'm going to be held responsible if I don't. Every additional ounce of power that I have is another pound of responsibility. When Yaakov Avinu saw the Egla Arufa, when he saw Yosef's feeling and understanding, he came alive. Shar Salo Shechina, the Shechina settled on him. And perhaps we can suggest further, Vayomer Yisrael Rav, if indeed this is how my son understands the inyan of Rav, the inyan of being a leader, if he sees himself not as an independent entity of power, but only as a shliach of the Kadosh Baruch Hu, now I can say, Oid Yosef b'nichai. When Yosef HaTzadik revealed himself to the Shvatim, they were quite astounded, to say the least. They were so taken aback that they could not speak. And Chazal tell us, Oy lanu miyoyim hadin, v'oy lanu miyoyim hatechacha. Yosef HaTzadik said two words, Ani Yosef. And the Shvatim were floored. We are going to face the same kind of embarrassment, Lios Idlovik, Liachamei Liasim Shana, when it comes to our own din v'cheshbon, and when things are going to be revealed to us. So what is it exactly that's going to be revealed to us in the same nature as the story here of Yosef HaTzadik's revelation that is going to embarrass us, that is also going to render us speechless? Who is the Yosef HaTzadik in our lives that we don't know about, that is going to eventually say, Ani Yosef, and we're going to be caught off guard and totally unprepared for it? The answer is, as explained in the Sefer Sichos, his Chaskos from the Sineir, that Yosef that's going to say, Ani Yosef, and we're going to be shocked. You are Yosef? That Yosef is ourself. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to reveal to us who we are and what kind of neshama we have and what we could have done with our life, we're going to be speechless, considering how we neglected the opportunities. Rav Shvadron Chaim Lebracha always used to say a story that he did not know his father personally. His father passed away when he was young. Came time for his bar mitzvah, he yashed his father's tefillin. And there was an issue whether or not he should wear them or purchase new tefillin. His father's tefillin were very big, as the minig was of Hasidim of previous generations. He showed them to his Rebbe Rav Elya Lopian, Zecher Tzadik Levrach, and he looked at the pashiyas, and he mentioned that these pashiyas are lechtige pashiyas, as if there's a light coming out of them. They're beautiful pashiyas, more than just nice. There's a spirit of Kiddusha that shines through over here. But on the other hand, he also pointed out that the pashiyas were very big, and that the custom in the more yeshivish circles was to wear smaller tefillin because it fits better into the allotted location, into the perimeters of where tefillin is supposed to be. And so he suggested that he trade them in. So Shalom writes that he went to a local cipher who took the tefillin, exchanged them for a tefillin that a fine Erlich cipher wrote, much smaller, much more consistent with the particular minig of where he had belonged to at that time, and he wore his new tefillin proudly at his bar mitzvah. It wasn't until many, many years later that Rosh Shalom walked into a shul Purim time, and he saw a bunch of people gathered around the Megillah, and everyone was pushing together to get a sight, to get a look at the words of this Megillah. So he asked, what is so special about that Megillah? So they told him this was a Megillah written by Rav Moshe Lipshavitska. Rav Moshe Lipshavitska, the Or Pnei Moshe, was the Sofer of the Rebbe of Melech, Sofer of the Noimali Melech. And he was considered a Baal Ruach HaKodesh. When he wrote a pair of tefillin for someone, he wrote it custom-made to that person's neshama, tailor-made to the mechus and the mesias of that person. And when you wore that tefillin that he made for you, your whole life was a different kind of life. Your whole davening was a different kind of davening. Your spirit was uplifted to the point where you could have never imagined that you reached such madregas. And here was a Megillah written by Rav Moshe Lipshavitska. Even before the war, it was rare. After the war, one can well imagine that it is extremely unusual to be able to find an authentic writing of Rav Moshe Lipshavitska, but this Megillah was real, and everybody was pushing to see it. Pastor John looked at it, and the letters seemed very, very familiar to him. He reminded himself of what Rav Eli Lopian had said, that it looks like Lech Tegaisius. Somehow there's a kind of Kedusha. I don't know if you or I would have seen it, but Tzadikim were able to see that Lech Tekait in the Isius. And someone saw Reb Shalom wondering about this. So he went over to him and said, you should be familiar with this. After all, your father had a pair of tefillin written by Rav Moshe Lipshavitska. Don't you know that? And Reb Shalom said, no, I never knew that. But he knew it now. Now, if you can put aside the Kedusha aspect of a pair of tefillin like these, if it's shy to say such a thing, put aside the Kedusha aspect, but can you imagine the monetary value of this even? How much people would pay for an authentic parsha written by Rav Moshe Lipshavitska today? Of course, Rav Shalom raced back to that cipher, who many, many years ago he had given the tefillin to and traded them in for a nice pair of tefillin. And he began to not ask, but plead, do you still have those tefillin? The cipher didn't even remember. He begged, and the cipher looked up his old records, and finally he said, yeah, he remembers. So what happened with those parshiyos? Rav Shalom asked. I'll buy them back. The cipher explained he also had no idea that these parshiyos were so precious. Apparently he could not sell them. Again, given those circles, it was somewhat too large. And eventually he was committed to Shemais, buried someplace. He has no idea where, or even how one would begin to look for it. Rav Shalom said he had in his hands one of the most prized possessions possible, but because he did not know what it was, it slipped right through his fingers. And of course he stressed the Musar aspect of this, that sometimes a person does not know what kind of treasure he owns, and that is the greatest frustration in life. Not that you fail to attain something from someone else, that you fail to value what you have, what kind of a child you have, what kind of a family you have, what kind of life HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you. Why didn't you take advantage of it? And this is what left the Shvatim speechless. And during the week of Parshas Vayigash, where Yosef Atzadik reveals himself to the Shvatim, I am Yosef, this is a lesson that we all have to stop and ponder for a couple of moments, because the Zohar HaKadosh tells us that each week is crowned with the Kedusha of that Shabbos, with the Parsha that coincides to that Shabbos. So if there's any week where we have to step back and say, what is it that I have that I'm going to be shocked later to learn I had it, but I never took the time to think of it, it's this week. Yosef Atzadik was hidden from the Shvatim, both before the Mechira and obviously during the time of the actual selling of Yosef Atzadik. They did not know what the Madreg of Yosef Atzadik was. He was able to hide himself. Even when they saw him later in Mitzrayim, they did not recognize him. Yosef Atzadik was the tzinar. He was the conduit, the wagon, so to speak, that provided all midas of Kedusha to Klal Yisrael. It's not shaykh to even understand the great Kedusha and Tahara and the Madrega of Yosef Atzadik that paved the way for anybody, whoever has a Messiah, to be able to run away from it. But Yosef Hatzadik's greatest Madrega was an ability to cover this and to hide it. That's one of the Madregas that real Tzadikim have. Now, Yaakov Avinu, the Shvatim, they had a feeling that this king, this Mishnah Melech Mitzrayim, was no ordinary person. But as much as they attempted to reveal who he really is, he was a step ahead of them. They could not get a handle on it. Vayigash of Yehuda. And when he challenged Yosef Atzadik, he really challenged Yosef Atzadik to reveal himself. Who are you, a tzaddik or a rasha? A madman trying to destroy us with all sorts of unfounded charges, controlling the world, or are you a great tzaddik with some type of a cheshbon over here that we somehow cannot even fathom? Yehuda wanted this to be brought to a head. And whatever koyach a tzaddik has to be able to demand that Kedusha reveal itself, Yehuda applied over here, and he applied that with Mesilas Nefesh. And at that point, Yosef could no longer cover up the Kedusha. The great Kedusha of Yosef Atzadik had revealed itself now to the Shvatim. Suddenly the Shvatim realized what kind of a parsha this was. Yosef Atzadik said, Haitziai kol ish ne'olai. Sifrei Chasidus explained, Haitziu kol ish. Everyone has to remove themselves from the bchina of ish. In other words, hispashtus hagashmias. Lift yourself from your human constraints. You are no longer a human being. V'lei amad ish itai. Nobody that was there when Yosef Atzadik revealed himself was any longer the bchinas ish. They had soared to the madrega of neshama or malach. Totally spiritual. Like it says when the Kohen Gadol entered the Kodesh HaKadoshim, V'chol adam lo yeh b'oyel moed. All of Yosef Atzadik's efforts to conceal himself had now unraveled. No one else would be able to take the Kedusha at that time. Therefore Yosef Atzadik demanded that all human beings, those that cannot lift themselves beyond the limitation of human being, they must leave the room. Because nifalu mipanav, they were frightened from his pnimius. They were frightened from the true madrega of Yosef Atzadik that had suddenly revealed itself. And then he commanded them to describe to Yaakov Avinu as kol asher isam whatever they saw. What does this mean, whatever they saw? They should tell Yaakov Avinu what they heard. No, Yosef Atzadik wanted them to reveal to Yaakov Avinu what his real madrega was. That he was Paishet Surah V'Loivish Surah. That he had the ability to put on the costume of a king in Mitzrayim. And then remove that costume that perhaps represented Gashmias of Gashmias. And to clarify the Or Hagonis that shined within him, which was Neshama of Neshama. And the Shvatim were frightened. They were frightened at how this Kedusha was next to them all along, and they never realized it. They accused Yosef Atzadik of Lashon Hara. They accused Yosef Atzadik of Gaiva. They wound up selling him all because they legitimately believed that this was an empty shell. He had totally fooled them. He had never revealed even a fraction of this Kedusha to them all along. They knew perhaps that it was shaykh for a tzaddik to cover up Kedusha, but to cover it this way, to this extent, they were taken aback. They were floored. They Pasha did not know how to respond to this. My father told me a story that the Baal Shem HaKadosh was a young man, and he was traveling through the town of Lvov, and the Pnei Yeshua had then ordered all shaykhtim to come and present their knives before him. I don't know if the Baal Shem Tov himself was a shaykh or he had prepared a knife for someone else, but in any event, the Baal Shem Tov at that time had not revealed himself yet. He was a hidden tzaddik. No one knew who he was. And he stood on line, and when he presented the chalif, his knife, to the Pnei Yeshua looked at him, looked at the knife, and responded, Eich hab ich nicht gemeint. I didn't mean you. The Baal Shem HaKadosh later said, From Malachim and Srafim hab ich mich gekent behalten. Before angels and the fiery beings, I was able to hide myself. But for this Prince of Torah, I could not cover myself. He saw right through me. The Shvatim really believed that if Yosef was as great as he was, it was impossible that they shouldn't have seen it. And now that Yosef revealed himself and taught them how he could cover himself up, and they looked back and understood how they mishandled him all along, they were just at a loss of words. And that's what the Medrash means. When Abba Kain Badl in the Medrash says, Oilanu miyoyim hadin, Oilanu miyoyim atechacha. When we too are going to face the Ani Yosef, we're going to be frightened. How does that apply to us? This idea of how the neshama is covered up presents itself to every individual in many different ways. Each and every one of us has a special parsha in our heart. We are a neshama kedosha v'tzahira, gevaya me'al gevaya, more than any malach or saraf. Our body, our senses, our physical being is just a coat, it's just a cover for the neshama. And every neshama has koiches neurons in his gavim v'atzunim. Every machshava, every dibur, every maisa, every thought, every word, every act that we do creates or destroys worlds. However, it's so hidden. This world, the Yetzer Hara and his cohorts, hide everything. To us it appears like down here, this is where it all is, that the guf is the main thing. Our seichel is so small compared to the potential that we really have. Mm-hmm. The rega after Yetzias Neshama, when suddenly everything becomes clear, when we hear Ani Yosef, and we see what a neshama really is, what our neshama really is, what my neshama really is, and we understand how much we accomplish with every word of tefillah, with every word of kindness, with every act of chesed. The neshama is so floored, so frightened. We look back at our life and we can't believe how we underestimated ourselves, how we missed opportunities. How could I have lived all along, all these years with such a neshama and to have no inkling of a hasaga about how intense its kiddusha is, and not to realize how powerful it was, and how much it could be mashpia. The Medrash says, Oilanu miyayna din, Oilanu miyayna techacha. If the Shvatim were so frightened, imagine how we are going to be frightened. Techacha really means to show the way. There's going to come a time when HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to show us just how powerful our neshama is, what our potential could have been, and what we could have reached. If we would truly see what takes place in the heavenly realms with every mitzvah that we do, we would have no chira, we would have no choice of not doing mitzvahs all day. So essentially, this is the key to utilizing our life, to taking advantage of our existence. And that's why this world is called Olam. Olam means cover up, a lashon of halama. The key to the Yetzer Hara, how he controls our life, is by covering up and hiding how great our Torah would be, our mitzvahs would be, our chesed would be. The Torah describes the clothes that Yosef gave to the Shvatim. L'chulam nasan la'ish chalifais simolais, u'le'binyamin nasan shlosh meis kesef, chamish chalifais simolais. Chalifais simolais doesn't just mean a change of clothing, explains the Safem. After Yosef, his galus, he gave this present to his brothers, an ability to take off all of the malbushim, to take off all of the coverings and to switch it, to be megala the pnimiyas. He gave a koyach to the Shvatim to teach their children how to reveal the pnimiyos of their own neshamas. Just like they could not possibly understand who Yosef was, and Yosef had covered it up, Yosef explained to the Shvatim that in the course of Galus, the neshamas of Klal Yisrael will be covered up, and we will not only lose track over who our brothers are, we'll fail to understand who we are. Yosef gave his brothers a koyach lehachlis asmolis, to switch clothes. In other words, to take off the clothes that cover up the neshama and to replace it with a kind of outside covering that enhances the neshama as opposed to covering it up. And that is also the p'china of the neshama Yisrael. He explains that it revealed to us every Shabbos that we feel, or we ought to feel every Shabbos. It is an enhancement of our etzem neshama that is covered up throughout the week. And therefore Chazal tell us, Shlo yehei malbushcha shel Shabbos ki malbushach shel chayil, that your clothes on Shabbos should not be like your weekday clothes. In other words, on Shabbos we have an achrayus to stop and think, reevaluate our lives, and appreciate who we are and what can get lost under the covers. And while this is true every Shabbos, it is especially true this Shabbos, where we read Parshas Vayigash, where Yosef reveals himself and teaches us how to do exactly the same. Vayitin es karli b'pchi, Yosef cries. Chazal tells us he was crying about the Churban Bayis Rishon and Bayis Sheni. So Semes explains that Yosef saw over here the tzaros of Klal Yisrael, and the tzaros that he made the brothers go through was in place of the tzaros of Klal Yisrael. Had Yosef been able to hold himself back and continue to make the Shvatim suffer, he would have avoided the Churban altogether. But Yosef he just couldn't do this anymore to his brothers. And therefore, right away in the next pasuk it says, he began to cry about the Churban, which now we would have to endure. But you see how great the power of the Shvatim is, explains the Safem. The little bit more that Yosef Atzadik had to do is taking us more than 2,000 years to be able to do. But by the same token, you see the power of Yosef Atzadik. And if it's in this week's Parsha that Yosef Atzadik teaches us how to reveal ourselves, we have to be inspired to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that indeed we should be zeicha to be able to see it.
This shiur is distributed by Kol Hadas, 11 Stei Chenet Street, Yerushalayim. For donations, please call 02-5383-999. Fax 02-538-0267. Postbox 57035.